Welcome to the MAHA Media Hub and the second year of the MAHA Revolution. I'm Tony Lyons, president of MAHA Action. I hope that you all had a beautiful holiday season, and I'm sure that you've all noticed what's happening, which is that Trump's HHS has started the year off with just incredible news and has gone a long way towards making this country healthier. What amazing wins for the president, for Secretary Kennedy, for MAHA, and most importantly, for all of the American people. First, this morning in a White House press conference, HHS announced new common sense dietary guidelines. As Secretary Kennedy said, this is the launch of a revolution in American food culture. The Trump administration is showing incredible backbone, incredible courage by telling Americans the truth about the food they eat and how it's been making them sick. This is the day that the world will definitely remember helped reverse the chronic disease epidemic. Kyle Diamantas, the Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods at FDA, will join us later to discuss many of these historic changes. Second, Jim O'Neill, the Deputy Secretary of HHS and Acting Director of the CDC, has announced new vaccine guidelines. The CDC will now recommend just 11 vaccines instead of 17, coming in line with the recommendations from countries all around the world, including Denmark. There will also be fewer doses recommended and some vaccines recommended at a later age. This is a seismic change. It's a seismic shift from, maybe the first time ever that the schedule has been lowered, lessened, reduced, not increased, resulting in a smarter vaccination policy, fewer shots, and a lighter load of adjuvants and preservatives. Of course, nothing is being banned. And as Secretary Kennedy promised, everybody will be able to get any vaccine they want. So this is also a great victory for informed consent. And the third historic victory for the week came when the Senate version of the House Appropriations Bill took out Section 453, which would have granted pesticide companies a liability shield, protecting their products and any harm that their products caused, including cancer. So many of you rallied and fought and lobbied Congress and did everything you could do to put pressure on people. And that clearly played a role in the removal of that pesticide rider. So that's another really big win. And then we've been making great progress, great strides in environmental policy. On New Year's Eve, Administrator Lee Zeldin announced that Trump's EPA will start to regulate dozens of phthalate chemicals that they found unreasonably risky to both workers and the environment, and that excessive exposure to phthalates can cause endocrine disruption and reproductive health issues. So this is yet another MAHA win in a very short period. And Lee Zeldin said, that his EPA, that Trump's EPA is following gold standard science and promoting radical transparency. And they're really going to use the most rigorous scientific methods, including independent expert peer review, extensive public input and comment, and cutting edge cumulative exposure testing. So Trump's EPA is showing that they're here to protect the American public and to force corporations to mitigate harm, mitigate risk, and adopt cleaner practices. So we're looking forward. MAHA is looking forward to continuing to work closely with Lee and his whole team. We're all so grateful for all these great developments. And, Secretary Kennedy is showing that the MAHA movement is not just a temporary disruption that can be dismissed or navigated or waited out, but it's a genuine grassroots expression of a deep and pervasive frustration with the systemic failures and corporate corruption that have led Americans to be some of the sickest people in the industrialized world. So this is the MAHA moment, and President Trump is clearly the MAHA president, and we're grateful to him. We're grateful to Secretary Kennedy. On today's show, we have some of the fiercest MAHA warriors, trailblazing policymakers who've made many of these changes possible. So we're joined, as I've said, with Jim O'Neill and Kyle Diamantas, and also by Admiral Brian Christine, HHS Assistant Secretary for Health, Jess Kramer, Trump's EPA's Assistant Administrator for Water, Stephanie Spear, Secretary Kennedy's Deputy Chief of Staff, Mary Holland, the head of Children's Health Defense, Dr. Eric Berg, the Knowledge Doc. So first up, we have Jim O'Neill. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Tony. And thanks for that wonderful summary of all the amazing wins that the administration has had just this week for MAHA. It's been a culmination of a huge amount of work, and it was really exciting to help announce two of the many projects that you mentioned this week. So I'm sure Kyle and Stephanie will talk more about the amazing dietary guidelines that they produced. But they're really a revolution in food culture that is finally bringing information in the public up to date with nutrition science. We're going to be announcing more nutrition research tomorrow focused around metabolism. It's really a great day for addressing chronic disease and staying healthy. Mostly I'm going to talk about vaccines. So a month ago, President Trump asked me to review the vaccine schedule, which is maintained by CDC, and especially to talk to foreign governments and look at their practices for vaccines. So I proceeded to do that. I talked to my peers in several foreign governments, the health ministries. I asked them how they make decisions about recommending vaccines, how do they review safety, how they review efficacy, how they construct a schedule, how they revise their decisions, how they communicate them. It was very enlightening. It was lots of very helpful people from these other health ministries, from Germany, from Denmark, from Japan. And I also talked with a lot of our vaccine scientists at CDC, at FDA, and around the department at NIH. And we also conducted a scientific review. I really wanted to be as rigorous as possible. So, as many of you know, there is not as many lengthy duration safety trials around a lot of vaccines as people assume when they inject their children. So the limits of the data, the gaps in our knowledge were definitely something we examined. On the other hand, babies are being born every day, parents are making decisions every day, doctors are advising on decisions every day, whether to give the birth dose of this vaccine or that vaccine. And while we are launching new studies and we do need more information, it was essential to give people the best recommendations, the best advice that we could. And so on Monday, I officially updated the CDC vaccine schedule for child and adolescent immunizations and focused people's attention on a subset of all the recommended vaccines. You know, a lot of parents look at the vaccine schedule, listen to their pediatricians, and they think, wow, that is a lot of doses over the course of childhood. I'm not saying maybe no vaccines, but I'd like to know which ones are the priorities. Which ones are the safest, which ones protect against the most virulent and most dangerous infectious disease. We finally answered that question. We didn't ban any vaccines, but we did help people make priorities. We did say, of all the vaccines that have been recommended in the past, these are the most important. Then secondly, here are some that are advisable for certain high-risk groups, such as babies born to mothers who have tested positive for hepatitis B, is one example. And then other vaccines, they continue to be covered by insurance, but from now on, they are considered shared clinical decision-making. And the reaction since Monday has been much more positive than I thought. I know there are critics, I know there are defenders of the status quo. I know there are people that would like you to lump all vaccines together, assume that if you have any concerns about any vaccine, you must be anti-science and anti-vax. All of this on this call know that's not the case. So I was trying to add a new official government voice saying, every vaccine is different. The data is limited, but people, of course, parents need to make decisions. And this is the best advice that we have that's up to date as we continue to do these studies. So I would appreciate all of your help in examining these recommendations, in purveying them, in talking to parents, talking to doctors, making sure they understand that you don't have to give your children all the vaccines, especially when they're very young and fragile. and that it's fair to ask questions, to ask your doctor questions, to ask your pharmacist questions. States regulate pharmacies and doctors, of course. CDC doesn't mandate anything, it merely gives advice, but it has a responsibility to give the best advice possible, and that's what I think we did. And that on top of the dietary guidelines are really two great openings to the year. We're finally applying overdue scientific rigor to two of the most important things that can affect people's health. So I'm very proud to be associated with both of those.
Thanks so much, Jim. And, I'd like to personally thank you for this shift in vaccine policy. It's exactly the kind of shift and the kind of common sense way of thinking this through that Secretary Kennedy and President Trump promised. So it's just great to see this really just coming true and coming to, into place so that people can really benefit all around the country from these changes. So thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you, Tony.
Next up, we have Admiral Brian Christine, Assistant Secretary for Health. He also leads the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps, and he's focused on public health priorities, including chronic disease prevention and improving the overall health of everybody in this country. So thanks so much for everything you do, and welcome to the show.
Tony, thank you so much for allowing me to be on the show today. It's a historic day, like so many people are saying, and will continue to say, a historic day to make America healthier than it's ever been. My name is Brian Christine. I'm by training a urologic surgeon. I had an over 30-year practice in urology with a real emphasis on men's health. I closed that practice down in June of last year because I had the good fortune, the blessing to be nominated by the president to serve with Secretary Kennedy as the Assistant Secretary for Health here at the Department of Health and Human Services. And you see that I am in uniform because I'm the senior flag officer, the senior admiral, and I lead the Commission Corps of the U.S. Public Health Service. That's about 5,300 doctors, nurses, scientists, dentists who are commissioned by the president. We carry rank and we are out there taking healthcare to the American people. We serve the president, we serve Secretary Kennedy. We do everything we can do to investigate, to find, and to address the root causes of medicine and to take the secretary's message forward. And being in this role is the pinnacle of my medical career. It's really special to serve with Bobby Kennedy. We are focused at the Office of the Assistant Secretary. We are focused on addressing, as I said, the root causes of disease. We see the disease that's out there, the chronic diseases, the obesity, the diabetes, the obesity rates in our children. And we are committed to working to end these diseases, to end these horrible maladies that affect our country. We are absolutely bringing radical transparency in our role to bring Bobby's vision out to the public and to make America healthier. The Office of the Assistant Secretary is staffed by incredibly talented individuals. These individuals have worked so hard to make the dietary guidelines released today a reality. And we're going to continue to push that kind of science and that kind of effort forward. For me, I'll be doing media related to the dietary guidelines to support them, including op-eds, direct-to-cameras, and interviews. We're going to be out there and we're going to evangelize and spread the gospel of these new guidelines. As I told you, I am a urologist by training with a real interest in men's health. And Tony, I tell you, men in this country are facing a silent health crisis. Men have higher suicide rates. We have a lower life expectancy. We have higher rates of diabetes and premature death. In November, I worked with Commissioner Marty McCary at the FDA, and we had an expert panel on testosterone replacement in men. And it was mirrored to the very successful expert panel on hormone replacement in women that had occurred. And we thought, women deserve this kind of attention. We need to right the wrongs of the past, and we need to do the same thing for men. And we did. That expert panel was amazingly well received. We're going to be continuing on and following up with that. There are some things we're going to do to build off that expert panel. If there's anything that Secretary Kennedy is known for, it's to live a healthy lifestyle, to support the health of all women and all men in this country. I am personally committed to making sure that the good work that we do to promote health in women and children has a parallel track for men. It's high time that we focus on men, not at the expense of healthcare and women, but again, as a parallel sibling track, we're committed to that. I think it's going to be something really special to see in 2026. Undersecretary Kennedy, we've got gold standard science. We see that with the dietary guidelines. We see that with everything that's going on at the NIH and at the FDA. You see that here at the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health. Gold standard science, that's what the Secretary demands. That's what we're delivering. We are really excited to put those things into action. Listen, I'm proud to be part of this team. As I said, it's the pinnacle of my career to work with Secretary Kennedy and the great staff here. I look forward to doing it. I look forward to hopefully addressing this group more in the future. Thank you for all that you do. We are there with you. Thank you to all the MAHA moms and dads. Great things are ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much. And, thanks for your dedication to real science, to the idea that you have to be open and that we've had a generation of corporate corrupt science that we've followed. And now we have to be open to all different kinds of ideas. And that, I think, is what gold standard science means, that we don't exclude any voices. It's not just the most powerful voices, not the best funded ones from big corporations. It's a really wide range. And that's what I think is going to make us, succeed and finally become more healthy. So thanks so much for all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Kyle Diamantas. He heads the agency's human foods program, looking at all FDA nutrition and food safety activities. He's the FDA's top food sort of czar, and he sets the strategic direction and the operations for food policy. He played a key role in creating these new dietary guidelines that came out today, and we're so grateful for that work and that outcome. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, Tony. Yeah, great to be on. Thanks for having me. Just want to give a very quick shout out to Jim O'Neill and Dr. Brian Christine, two real professionals and visionaries. And a lot of folks don't know that the dietary guidelines actually live out of OASH, the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health, that Dr. Christine leads. So very thankful for the work from Dr. Christine and his entire team for leading the entire HHS effort on getting the dietary guidelines across the finish line in coordination with USDA. Look, the message on the dietary guidelines released today is really a simple and non-controversial one, and that's to eat real food. We want to evangelize real food. This is a framework, intended to customize, for individuals, for families. Everybody can eat a healthy diet and an affordable diet within this framework that we put forward today as part of the dietary guidelines for Americans. What are sort of the keys that are announced today? It's to prioritize whole foods, right? That's healthy proteins, both animal and plant-based sources. It's to avoid highly processed foods, certain types of highly processed foods, particularly those that lack nutrient density, that are made with highly refined carbohydrates and are full of added sugars and sodium. Those are really the key highly processed foods that we focus on these dietary guidelines. I think as most folks on this call know, FDA and USDA are working on creating a definition for ultra-processed foods, that it will be a 2026 priority deliverable for both departments. And we want to make sure that we do that in a methodical way. And we're focused here in the dietary guidelines about those highly processed foods that have a history and are really backed by evidence-based research on some of their harms. Again, those that have refined carbohydrates, high levels of added fats and sugars, and certain additives, chemical additives as well. Look, the dietary guidelines also tackle fat, right? We do keep in the saturated fat cap of 10%. But we tackle that through reduction of ultra-processed foods, these highly processed foods that often have significant higher amounts of fat than whole foods do. There's also new guidance on school milk related to saturated fat that plays a role. And so, this is not a sort of new iteration of what past science has. This is a fundamental shift in the dietary guidelines. If you go back to the first version in the 1980s, at that time, America had about 15% obesity rates. We now have obesity rates that are higher in the 40 the 40 to 50% range. And so the policies that the dietary guidelines have followed since the 1980s have in large part fundamentally failed us when it comes to addressing these root causes of our chronic diseases, particularly things like obesity and diabetes. The first iterations of the dietary guidelines essentially called for avoiding all fat and eating a whole lot of carbs. And again, we know that that is no longer sound nutrition research supported by the mainstream. Everything in this 2025, 2030 version of the Dietary Guidelines for Americans is supported by evidence and gold standard science, and it's a document that we're really proud of. And it's one that every American can easily satisfy through an affordable diet. So this is a monumental win for Secretary Kennedy, for HHS, for Secretary Rollins at USDA. And it's just the beginning. This is not a goalpost. This is not scoring a touchdown. This is really the kickoff to a year in 2026 where we really want to be promoting nutrition and food reform as a whole. And it's a kickoff to a lot of good things to come from both departments as we tackle these issues, really with a whole of government approach. I think one thing you're seeing under the Trump administration is that we are committed to providing a whole of government approach, unison and unity across the entire federal government to tackling these issues. So we're really proud of the work we've done. No nutrition document in history will ever be universally accepted by everyone. There will always be things that people will question, that people will criticize. But the fundamental baseline of these dietary guidelines to promote whole foods and to minimize consumption of certain highly processed foods is something that every American should agree upon. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, that's clearly true that there are always going to be, people who are going to write hit pieces, who are going to come out and say this is terrible. But clearly, this is an incredible step forward. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you've done and the work that the whole team has done to make this happen. So thanks a lot for coming on. Next up, we have Stephanie Spear. She is Secretary Kennedy's Deputy Chief of Staff and Special Counselor. She's incredibly smart, strategic, thoughtful, and plays a fundamental, just a really key role in all of the successes that Kennedy has. She's also one of the most loyal people that I've met, dedicated to President Trump and Secretary Kennedy's historic MAHA plans. So thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for everything you do.
All right. Thank you, Tony. This week has been historic, as other speakers have already noted. On Monday, HHS Deputy Director Jim O'Neill, in his role as acting director of CDC, signed a decision memo accepting recommendations from a comprehensive assessment of the U.S. childhood immunization practices. President Trump, through a presidential memorandum, instructed Secretary Kennedy and Deputy Secretary Jim O'Neill to update the U.S. childhood vaccine schedule if they found that superior approaches existed abroad. The scientific assessment compared U.S. childhood immunization recommendations with those of peer nations. It analyzed vaccine uptake and public trust, evaluated clinical and epidemiological evidence and knowledge gaps, and it examined vaccine mandates and identified next steps. The assessment reviewed 20 peer-developed nations in both the number of diseases addressed in its routine childhood vaccination schedule and the total number of recommended doses. And in fact, it found that many peer nations recommend fewer routine vaccines. They actually achieve stronger childhood health outcomes and maintain a high vaccination rate through public trust and education rather than mandates. But bottom line, we need more studies, and HHS is committed to doing those studies using gold standard science. We'll be doing placebo-controlled randomized trials and long-term observational studies to better characterize vaccine benefits, risks, and outcomes. We'll also be doing shorter-term studies at FDA and CDC. So that is a commitment we've made, and literally daily we spend time making sure that we're getting the right studies prioritized and the right protocols through. It is a huge effort. We also had other historic news this week. Our announcement today of the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. It's the most significant reset of federal nutrition policy in decades. HHS and USDA today, we reclaimed the food pyramid and we turned it upside down. If you haven't viewed our new website yet, be sure to do so at realfood.gov. Share it with all your friends and family. I want to shout out special thanks to Joe Gebbia Jr. and his incredible team at America by Design. They worked tirelessly to brand the DGAs with the upside down pyramid, interactive website, and edgy video. Also, huge thanks to our partner, USDA. It was a huge team effort to get these dietary guidelines out today. Today marks a decisive change in federal nutrition policy made possible by President Trump's leadership and the work of MAHA moms and public health advocates like all of you who demanded reform. These new guidelines will revolutionize our nation's food culture and make America healthy again. As Secretary Kennedy said, and Kyle just said a few minutes ago, the message is clear: eat real food. We're off to a great start so far this year, only 7 days into the new year and already 2 historic announcements. So buckle up as we have lots more to come, including our work to close the GRAS loophole and make baby formula healthy again through Operation Stork Speed. We're also going to be hosting roundtables regarding health impacts of microplastics, EMFs, PFAS, and other toxic exposure. We'll be partnering with EPA and doing lots more with USDA along with other agencies. So I want to especially thank Tony Lyons and everyone at MAHA Action for day in and day out propping us up. I could never stress enough how much that support means to us. We're working hard each day to get the priorities of President Trump and Secretary Kennedy across the finish line. And with your support, we're going to achieve our goal and make America healthy again. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And, Stephanie, you're really one of the unsung heroes of HHS. Most people don't know all the work that you do, and you're clearly at this 24/7 for, months and months and months. And we're all just really grateful.
Thank you, Tony.
Next up, we have Dr. Eric Berg. He's known as the Knowledge Doc. He works to mitigate the chronic disease problems that so many people in this country have by teaching the public the importance of healthy diet and all kinds of other tips that can really just make their lives better. He's been a really vocal backer of changing the broken food pyramid. So, this is a really important day for him and a culmination of so much of the work that he's done. So thank you for all that work, and thanks for all the work that you've done to help us. And welcome.
Tony, this is amazing, because if we just see what's happening, we just reverse the whole thing upside down. I was actually blown away and happier than I wasn't anticipating this much change. So this is very, very exciting. Let's talk about the big changes going from, the old mantra, low-fat, plant-based bias. Now we're actually full-fat dairy, aggressively restricting refined carbohydrates. Now, even though they did not mention low-carb directly, functionally, it's definitely low-carb because it's low ultra-processed foods, which is really huge. So the biggest thing they're invalidating is there's no more, they said no or limited added sugar in refined carbohydrates, because, people talk about sugar, but there's another carb that is not on the map for most people, and that is the refined industrial starches, modified food starch, modified cornstarch, maltodextrin. Well, they basically, they covered that here indirectly, refined carbohydrates. So that being said, in the 1990, I think, 2 version of the food pyramid, it was it 6 to 11 servings? We need to focus on these grains, and now it's 2 to 4. So you're going to see a lot of people getting healthy very quickly just from that alone. The emphasis on higher protein automatically is going to help so many people. And we're not afraid to just say it's meat, red meat especially. So this is going to help so many people. It is true that they are keeping the dietary fat, the saturated fats to 10%, but they did say more research is needed for that, which is okay. That's fine. But the big thing is the actual emphasis on ultra-processed foods named out as the primary driver of disease. Like that's huge. This has never before been done. So I was blown away, and this is going to create a lot of positive change. And I just wanted to mention one little point about uh, you know some attacks on MAHA, making America healthy again, with that word again, like we're going to go back with science. We're not going backwards with science. We're not doing that. We're trying to reestablish what occurred before the capture of science, before the capture of the food, before the capture. Every single, agency has been infiltrated with all sorts of corruption. So it's really about the capture, and we're not anti-science, we're anti-corruption. And this is why RFK is the best person for this job, and he's doing a great job. So I'm really excited about this new pyramid, and it's going to create some serious health in our population.
Thanks so much. And, let me just say that, you've really been one of the great partners in the MAHA fight for such a long time. And what I think we've been learning, and I've learned this from you, that this is not a fight against big food or fake science. This is a fight for a better way of thinking, a better way of eating, a better way of living that we create, and that then makes the old way, the way that we've been lied to and forced to sort of think that a certain way of living might work. That we learn that that's not the way to live, and that there's a better way to do it. So thanks so much for teaching millions and millions of people, including me, that there is a better way of living.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have Mary Holland. She is head of Children's Health Defense, a prolific author, former professor at NYU School of Law, just once again, a day and night advocate for protecting children's health for maybe 20 or 30 years. And, just really at the front of the battle to make children healthier and to right some of the wrongs that have been done to children over the last 20 or 30 years. So thanks so much.
Tony, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you and to MAHA and to President Trump and to Bobby Kennedy as secretary. This was an incredible week. Honestly, this is a week that many of us in this movement for 20 plus years weren't sure would ever happen on our watch. To know that the food pyramid has changed and the vaccine schedule has changed and has become much more tailored to individual children and their actual health needs is going to change. It's not only going to change children's lives, it's going to be saving children's lives. We're going to see measurable difference. We're going to see measurable results very soon. I do want to focus on what's happened with the vaccine schedule because it's so momentous. We have never seen reductions in the vaccine schedule that's been recommended. Literally up until now, as Eric Berg was saying, we've seen corruption of science, and we saw the advisory committee basically being a front for the pharmaceutical industry, pushing vaccines at the expense of children's health. And what we've seen even before the changes this week were the clearing out of the compromised people on ACIP. We saw the recommendation for the COVID shot that had very little support globally taken away, and we saw grants being taken away from the American Academy of Pediatrics, which has also essentially been bought by the pharmaceutical industry. But the changes this week to essentially create a couple tiers of vaccines, the most essential, and then those that children should skip, the flu vaccine, hepatitis B, hepatitis A, unless there's special criteria. Those are momentous changes that literally will save babies' lives. But what I'm most excited about that Dr. O'Neill talked about was really the continuing emphasis on gold standard science. We know that there's not a single one of these vaccines that's ever been given a true placebo-controlled trial. And that's going to change. That's going to get done. And then we'll see what happens with the schedule. One of the most striking things over the last 25 years, Tony, is that the key spokespeople in favor of the vaccine schedule, Dr. Paul Offit and other, they will never debate anyone. Bobby Kennedy for 20 years has said, I'll debate anyone. These people won't debate. And it really makes you wonder if they won't defend their policies in public Are they in fact indefensible? I think we're going to find out in the next couple of years. So I'm really excited about those changes, the shared decision making with healthcare practitioners, restoring trust. COVID really led to enormous pervasive distrust in public health authorities worldwide, particularly in the United States, and it was justified distrust. And so this is an effort, I think what will be a successful one, in being more transparent and telling people the truth. And I also want to mention what Stephanie Spear just said, that they're not going to stop just with food and vaccines, although those are incredibly important issues for children's health. They're also going to be looking at electromagnetic radiation issues. We focus on those as well at Children's Health Defense. They're going to be looking at microplastics. They're going to be looking at other toxic exposures. We really welcome that because we do spend the most and have the worst health. We have some of the worst health for children in the world. We have one of the highest infant mortality rates in the developed world. And I'm so excited that I believe these things are starting to turn around. And I'm so grateful to the movement, to the MAHA moms and dads, and to Secretary Kennedy and President Trump for making this possible. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Mary. And that's it's such a great point that anti-vaccine is just a corporate talking point. It's a corrupt corporate talking point. Any product at all needs to be able to withstand scrutiny and, has to win in the marketplace of ideas. And the idea that anything is off limits, anything at all, that's anti-science. So thanks so much for all the incredible work you've done, all the lawsuits you've been part of, the books you've written. You have done just incredible work, and we're grateful.
Thank you, Tony.
Next up is Jess Kramer, and she is working hard to advance President Trump's agenda for protecting health and the environment by providing clean water while powering the great American comeback. She's new to this job and plans to sort of tell us what her goals are, what her strategies are, and we're just so grateful to have her on the show.
Thank you so much, Tony. Appreciate it. I'm super excited to be here with you guys today. So my plan is to talk a little bit about where we've been in 2025 and forecast for you a little bit about where we're going to be going in 2026. We've heard a lot about the food pyramid and things related to food today. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about water. By way of background, I'm the assistant administrator for the Office of Water at EPA. I work for the best bosses in Administrator Zeldin and President Trump. The two core tenets that I'm going to talk about and everything that I highlight for you today, being committed to using gold standard science, being committed to radical transparency. I think you're hard pressed to find anybody who can argue about those core tenets because at that point, they're just trying to hide something. And it's extremely easy to see when they're trying to do that. So I want to talk a little bit about what we do in the Office of Water. We do a couple of things that I think are important, especially with respect to the MAHA movement, things that I think y'all are going to care about. So I want to talk a little bit about the regulatory bucket of what we do. So underneath my purview, I have the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. Boiled down, it means that I'm responsible for overseeing the offices that ensure that when you turn the tap on, what you're getting out for drinking water is clean drinking water. I also oversee the offices that ensure that when you flush the toilet, it goes away and it is properly treated before being discharged into surface waters in our country. On the regulatory side, specific to drinking water, I want to highlight a couple of things that we're working on related to lead and specifically related to the removal of lead and continued efforts on that front in drinking water. So under Trump's first term, we launched the lead and copper rule revisions. I had the acronym in my brain and I get lost in those sometimes. One of the core tenets of us enforcing that right now is the goal of removing all lead service lines in this country. And so we are actively moving toward that. One of the other core tenets of that rulemaking, which we are implementing and enforcing, is the requirement for systems to locate their lead service lines. Now, as you can imagine, this is an expensive endeavor, and we have communities across this country that struggle to be able to afford those things. So I want to also highlight We do regulations. We also provide a good amount of funding to ensure that we are achieving the public health outcomes that are extremely important in this office. So one of the funding actions I want to highlight for you is that at the end of last year, we rolled out $3 billion for lead service line removal actions. These are monies that can specifically be used by systems once they find those lines to take them out of the ground, removing the exposure to lead that we have seen in this country. And so we're very excited about those things, forecasting for you a couple of other things in this space that we're going to be doing. On the regulatory front, tackling PFAS in a couple of ways, enforcing maximum contaminant levels for PFOA and PFOS of 4 parts per trillion, reevaluating MCLs, National Primary Drinking Water Regulations, or 4 other PFAS. I know that people ask questions about the reevaluation of those other 4, and I want to take this moment to say, we need to do this because we need to follow the law, and we need to have legally defensible regulations in place that last. Unfortunately, the prior administration skipped a step in the Safe Drinking Water Act process, and so we will be going through the process of the Safe Drinking Water Act regulatory process for those 4, doing it in a legally defensible way, utilizing those principles of gold standard science and radical transparency while we go through that process. And so, that's certainly something to keep an eye on. That's upcoming. We also are going to be taking actions related to fluoride. We're in the process of doing a robust scientific analysis working with our friends and colleagues over at DHS. Administrator Zeldin and Secretary Kennedy are lockstep on these efforts. And so we are evaluating the science, again, gold standard science, evaluating it in a radically transparent way. I also want to highlight that as we're going through these actions that I'm forecasting, I have a very open door policy. If you want to talk to me, I'm here to talk. One of the things that has been concerning to me in the past for folks who have filled the role that I'm sitting in currently is a lack of availability and willingness to just sit across the table from folks, hear their concerns, answer questions, take into account information that we maybe haven't otherwise heard before. Those days are gone. We are committed to making America healthy again, and that requires us to sit down and hear from the folks who are experiencing what's happening on the ground that needs to be modified. Highlight for me what you're seeing. Highlight studies that you think that maybe we haven't evaluated, perspectives that you think we're missing. I am here for it, and I have a 100% open door policy. And so, again, Tony, I just want to say thanks so much for letting me get my feet wet today. No pun intended. As a water person, but really just appreciate the partnership that we've had with you so far, and look forward to continuing that partnership moving forward.
Thanks so much, Jess. And we're so grateful for that openness. I've talked to people who have tried for years to get to talk to somebody at the EPA, under prior presidents, and they were just never able to get that kind of access. So to hear you say that you're willing to talk to anybody, to listen to what their theories are, what their ideas are, what their science is, what studies they have, what they've seen, what they think those studies mean. All of that is just exactly what MAHA wants. That, we don't believe that, that there's any settled science, that there's ever going to be settled science. So it has to be a conversation. And, we may think that terrible things have happened in the past and think that we can do it much better. But that has to come through arguments, through making stronger cases for a better way of doing things that are common sense, that are practical, that are actually possible. So thanks so much for coming on, for being open, and for all that you and Lee and the whole team are doing at EPA to make it MAHA and to try to make this country healthier.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, it looks like next up we have Representative Anna Paulina. She's not quite ready yet, but she's going to be on in the next couple of minutes. She is a representative for Florida's 13th Congressional District and has been since 2023. She's a really vocal advocate for MAHA policies And one of the things that she's done is that she's really come out strongly in rejecting, any kind of a pesticide liability shield. And like all of us at MAHA, she believes that people have to stand behind their products, and that if the government is in the business of protecting big companies against the American public, we're never going to get better science. We're never going to get change. And that really is anti-science. So we want to not have liability shields from anything in any area, not in vaccines, not in chemicals of any kinds, not in pesticides. That's how we're going to get better science. So Representative Luna, is really on the right side there. One of the things she did was called the Do or Die Act, where she codified the phase out and the ban of certain synthetic food dyes that were found to be just really dangerous for the public. Generally, MAHA isn't for bans. We're for choice. We're for better science, for more science, for better arguments. So, really grateful for the work that Representative Paulina Luna is doing. And, looking forward to having her come on. She's just running a little bit late, just texted that she's rushing to get here. So, just a couple of other things that I guess we can touch on here. And that is that there have been just so many incredible wins. And something that you've seen this week that I haven't really seen before is that many of the recent wins of the various things that happened this week, it was very hard for newspapers and for TV shows to attack the progress that we've been able to make and that HHS has made in the last week. So, when you hear that, anti-science is can't be saying that every product in a certain category is always going to be safe, that even vaccines that aren't made yet, that they're going to be safe, that they should be protected, and that the protection of those companies is more important than the protection of the public, then, that should, raise your hackles. You should recognize that whether it's pesticides, vaccines, or really anything else, we need to be open to ideas at all times. And we need to be sure that we're never protecting companies at the expense of the public or of families, because, that's what people have power for. The power is to protect the people, not to protect the people who are harming the public. So it looks like Representative Luna is now here, and we're so grateful for the work she's doing once again and to have her here. Welcome.
I'm actually calling you from the House floor.
Great, thank you. How are things going there?
Things are going well. And I know with our recent win and removing that pesticide protection out of that bill coming down onto the floor could have only been accomplished by the grassroots activism from the MAHA people. So I can tell you that, sometimes, unfortunately, with the legislation, they try to slip things in, those poison pills, into pieces of legislation. But I know myself, as well as a few other members of Congress, said, this is dead on arrival. We're not going to accept it. And so they're able to gut it. But I'm very glad to see that you guys are holding Congress accountable, because it needs to happen.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's what we feel is our job. And, it's, like I've said before, we don't know what the answers are, but we know that we have to question things, and that we're never going to get good science if we don't question every authority. And we're never going to get any kind of reasonable science if we protect corporations who make dangerous products.
I was going to say, there's a ton of special interest money, as you guys know, that pours into Washington. I actually refuse to take any PAC money from pharma, but a lot of members do on both sides. And so even if it's instances in pharma, or sometimes you'll see organizations like Monsanto, especially if people sit on the ag committee. And so you do see it affect the legislation, but that's exactly why grassroots activism is important, especially as we go into the midterms. A lot of people up here are simply wanting to get reelected. And so if they get a large amount of pushback, especially online, if you guys are calling their offices and saying, hey, look, you're supposed to represent me, but you're putting stuff that's, in this legislation that's potentially making Americans sick, or whatever it might be, I mean, that all needs to be called out publicly. And so I can tell you that this is going to be my third term in office. And I've seen enough to know that, unless you are MMA, not CIA, so you have to literally be very loud and very straightforward with some of these people, you won't get anything done. But I do think that because of, that strategy and plan of attack, that's why we were able to accomplish what we were able to accomplish in the bill this week.
Yeah, that's great. And, we would love to just keep on working with you to fight any of these kinds of things when they come up, because we know that these companies aren't going to stop.
Absolutely. No, I'm right there with you. And I know that we've been able to make some good connections, especially with, again, our grassroots activists. But if you guys ever have any of those issues, don't hesitate to reach out. I know it's myself. There's actually an official MAHA caucus here in Congress. And so all of those members, if you contact them, should actually be willing to, champion these issues or say vocally that they're not going to vote for stuff if they continue to put it into the legislation.
Yeah, that's great. And it's just so nice to hear that there are people in Congress who will turn down money when they know that money is from and is based on and is on the side of real corruption and is going to lead to harming the American public.
Absolutely. I guess so. Before the parliamentarian comes over to yell at me for being on my phone. And again, I apologize for being late. I was actually stuck in committee and then we had to run to the House floor to vote. But do you have anything like questions directly for me about anything happening here on the Hill?
Yeah, I mean, I would just kind of like to think through, the best ways we can work together to get things done. So, maybe that's an offline question, and maybe we can have sort of a group that comes and meets with you. But this was a great win this week, and we'd like to just make sure that we use every connection, because we recognize that the Trump team, that this moment, this MAHA moment, is a once in a lifetime chance to really roll back things that have been going wrong for a long time.
Well, most certainly. I know that there's probably some activists on this listening. So what I would tell you is the best thing that you can always do is, find your members that are willing to champion these causes. So I'll give you a perfect example. When I first got elected in 2022, I immediately tried to work on removing Red 40 from food products, especially food products that are subsidized with SNAP and EBT. That if people are hungry, they apply for these programs, or if they're having issues with, food securities, they can get it. Well, why is it that we're basically subsidizing these people that genuinely need it with food that's making them sick, and then only to in turn turn around and then, later on down the line, they're suffering from diseases, and then it's long-term more money. And so it's just this vicious cycle. If we have clean food available for people, if we have things that are not giving kids autism or cancer, what a different society and population we would be. Not to mention, we can't even address right now what's happening with the fertility issues in this country. And I don't have enough time to go into that, but I'm sure I'll come back and we can discuss that further. But it goes into our food supply, right? Food is medicine. And so I try to champion that issue. And it was very, very hard to get support actually from within the chamber, because it just wasn't considered a sexy topic. And then when President Trump, joined forces, I know Bobby Kennedy Jr. was working very much so on this, pretty much in his own little island for a while. But when he joined forces with the administration, and then we immediately saw these changes is coming down from the top, it was, if it was left up to the House of Representatives to change, it would have happened. But because RFK Jr. was able to do it literally with a pen stroke, we've had massive wins for the American people. We can talk about the vaccine schedule rollback. We can talk about him literally just releasing the accurate food pyramid. I'm sure you grew up in the generation of the food pyramid being like, eat as many grains as possible and sweets at the top. That was totally funded in a BS food diagram. And now you're talking about actually genuinely making the American people healthy. But we do have a short window of opportunity. And you do have members of Congress that do want to work with the administration on this. And they're kind of also being at the same time educated on these topics. And so MAHA needs to remember that you guys have a voice too. And it's an incredible movement. And to not get discouraged maybe because you don't have direct access to a member. You guys have members that you can work with. Again, I encourage every person listening to this to look and see who's on the MAHA caucus, and then contact their office about legislation. Or if you have eyes and ears on legislation that's coming out where there's these poison pills and you guys get it before we do, we can then champion saying, hey, we're not going to vote for this and we'll kill the legislation, but we can't do it without your help.
Yeah, that's great. So we really want to help, and we really want to partner with you. And you made such great points. One of them is that people have said for decades now that poor people can't afford to eat healthy food, that the government can't afford to provide healthy food. And the point is that the government can't afford not to provide healthy food, that people can't afford not to eat healthy food. That's going to cost more money.
That's going to cost more money, but then you also you look and if these programs, if these manufacturers want to be able to have SNAP and EBT being used for their product, then they can't make the American people sick. And I think that that's a pretty sane response. I mean, regardless of where you're at on, SNAP and EBT, I think that that's a pretty common sense argument. And so I do think that the president and RFK Jr. have been very much so champions in holding these corporations accountable. You're seeing Walmart has actually rolled back from their Walmart in-house made products, a lot of the additives. You're seeing a lot of people be more health conscious. I think that there's an entire movement, but it can't stop. And it doesn't just stop with their food supply, right? It goes into the pharmaceutical industry. It goes into treatments. I know that recently the FDA removed those terrible black box warnings on hormone therapy for women going through menopause. I mean, these are all things that for decades were like literally brushed under the rug. And I think that that's also too because of the pharmaceutical cartels that exist in Washington, but understand that it exists on both sides. And so it is difficult to, not take the money, but it's the right thing to do, which is exactly why we do what we do. And so we're championing. If you need anything, let us know. But I don't know if you're hearing in the background, I'm getting called to go vote again, but just know that we'll continue championing and you can follow what we're doing on my official accounts at Rep Luna, whether it's on X or Instagram.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so that was a great show. Let me just wind up with a few comments. So, Representative Luna was making a great point that we should work closely with them. We should work closely with Lee Zeldin and his team. We should work closely with every branch of government that we can work with, that Trump's team is this team that is willing to work with us. And that so many, like I said before, so many activists have said that they haven't had this kind of access in their lives, in 20, 30 years. So this is an opportunity. This is a MAHA moment. We at MAHA have just incredibly powerful tools at our fingertips. We've got these media hub calls. We've got the MAHA report on Substack. We've got the MAHA Institute roundtables, the MAHA Summit that we're doing once a year. We've got MAHA films, MAHA books, MAHA parties, a MAHA mailing list of more than 2 million MAHA warriors, MAHA moms all around the country, thousands of influencers who watch this show, who've got hundreds of millions of followers. So, we're going to harness every bit of that power. We need to harness every bit of that power and to work with every cabinet member. And like I said, every branch of government to support and be a powerful resource to Trump's team in the midterms and in all of these battles, which are really battles for the American people. So, this country overwhelmingly wants to get more healthy. They know that they've been lied to. They know they've been poisoned. And they know they have, deep down, they know they have a team in place that's trying hard to do a better job. So thanks so much for all of you for sticking it out for this hour, for working so hard with us over the, last year. And, for the things that we're all going to try to do together. So you're going to get a follow-up email that's going to have, segments of this show, calls to action, all kinds of ways that you can participate. Things that you should do is, once again, go to the MAHA report. It's at mahareport.com. Read that. Great stories coming out daily. And then I just say, thanks again. Thanks for joining the MAHA Media Hub. Thanks for all that you've done. And we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 4 p.m.
America's children are sick, and moms have been betrayed. The time for empty promises, long past. Now is a time for action. MAHA is the most powerful force of collective action in generations. The grassroots power of moms and activists has created an army of health warriors with more reach than all mainstream media combined. Together, we can end the chronic disease epidemic. MAHA's influence is reaching millions. It's reaching Congress. And that energy, these chain reactions, are working.
How about Operation Stork Speed?
Dozens of food companies removing toxic ingredients.
I plan to lead by example.
MAHA is now.
We're talking about how to change the culture.
The American people want America healthy again.
It is a renaissance moment in health in America.
For health, freedom, and the truth, join us at MAHA Action.